think we're ready. Good afternoon. I just wanted to jump on with Megan. I pulled her on here at the last minute because I wanted to get her perspective on what we're going to be talking about. And today we're going to be talking about all about task management and how it really has impacted our business. So I know how much it could impact yours if it's fully embraced. So we're going to dive into what it was like before we had a task management system. And I'm actually going to go even further back than that. When I worked for my mom in this firm, I would ask her every day, what do I need to do today? And then I'd get done with that task and I'd ask her, what do I need to do now? And I'd ask her, what do I need to do now? As I finished every task. And then sometimes she would say, I don't know, go do this. And so she never really had a system to tell me what needed to be done. So it was very inefficient. And then also clients would call and say, hey, when is this going to be done? And I couldn't tell them when it was going to be done because I had no idea where anything was. So mom was constantly interrupted. And then I'll fast forward to 2014 when I took over the business. I followed that same path because I thought that's the way it should be. But I learned over the years that an effective task management system is the key to growing your business, growing your team, giving your clients a great client experience. It all starts with that task management system. And we tried like 6 different ones, and they're not all created equal. And while there's some really great options out there, you have to look at what is best for you. So I'm a big believer and use what's for you. So I'm going to have Megan talk about like when she first started, and she kind of went through the same experience as me. Like she would ask me all the time, what do I do now? So Megan, I'm going to let you take it over.
Yeah, so it's literally the exact same. I remember we would come in and kind of, just piddle around, do things till Lynn Leslie got there. And then we would basically all line up at Lynn's office and say, what should we do? What do you want us to do next? And I remember having like a notepad and literally just writing down every single thing that I needed to do. And I would just mark them off. And then once that was done, it was the same cycle, right back into Lynn's office to ask her, what should I do next? So just think about how ineffective that was, not only for us, but for Lynn, because then how was she getting anything done with 3 of her little minions just coming to her to ask, hey, what should I do now? What do you want me to do now?
Yeah. And there was times where we would tell you, just go sort that box. And you're like,
Yep.
what am I sorting for? So then y'all were out there like, well, that looks the same as this. And this looks the same as this. And so then it became like paper piles. And then you're like, I'm done. Here's all my papers all over the floor.
Yeah. And then think about how much money we're losing with us just sorting papers because y'all didn't know what we should do. We didn't know what we should do.
And also, we didn't even know a lot of times what stuff was actually in the office, like what people had sent in, because I was the bottleneck of all the information because most people sent it in to me. And then I would have to divvy it up. So y'all were always waiting on me to get out of meetings or get out of doing whatever I was doing because I tell you, go away until I can deal with you. And I know a lot of firm owners are dealing with this same thing. But a lot of them think that the team is just not wanting to take ownership, but that's not really what it was because like in your case, you would have taken ownership if you knew what you were taking ownership of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, to give you the perspective, she said that everything came to her. Everything went to her, like every client. I think there was maybe 2 clients that would go to Lynn and the rest all filtered to Leslie. So there were times we couldn't even talk to her throughout the day, because she was so busy with client calls, client meetings, touching everything for every client. And like she said, if she would have just let go of, I guess, that control and started, giving us clients sooner, the work would have got done faster. We would have been a lot happier because we wouldn't have to just keep going in our vicious cycle of what do you want me to do? We could just go to the client, get the work done, and do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And then too, from a client experience, y'all would answer the phone and you're like, I have no idea where she's at with it because there was no communication there because I was in meeting after meeting or phone call after phone call. And so y'all had no idea. So then the first task management system, I thought I would be really good at implementing. That was a big failure too. So and you actually were the ones like, I'm not using this.
Which one was that? I feel like we've went through so many. Arrow?
Yes. You're like, I'm not using this.
Yeah, that was a bad one. So this goes back to how important it is to implement your system. correctly and have the right person implementing it. Because Arrow was, for those of y'all that have seen Arrow, y'all understand what I'm trying to say, but it was literally like mass information. Like there was no way to easily see what you needed to do or easily see where you left off on something because it was just so much information crammed into the system.
Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't the best implementer of the system. And I know a lot of people in the accounting firms fall into the same trap where they're not the best implementers, because we may be really good at doing accounting and tax, but actually implementing a tech system may not be that was not my zone of genius. My zone of genius was like brainstorming, what do we need? That went on to our next system that worked really well for y'all, but it didn't work for me.
Yep. So that
was Jetpack.
Yeah. So with that one, we brainstormed it out to an extent. Like we said, okay, well, we need to be able to put these tasks in there. And I feel like that's kind of as far as we went with it. So we didn't think about, yeah, those are the tasks, but what are the views going to be like? How is it going to be able to automate? How could you see capacity in it? How could you see like a dashboard of where everything is at? So that was our big missing piece with Arrow or Jetpack, too many of them.
And then Jetpack, it was also hard to put one-off task in there. It was like, so anything a client, because this was still when I was getting a lot of information from everybody. So I couldn't quickly say, hey, Megan, go do this. And this is how you do it really quick. I had to go to your office and say, hey, Megan, can you do this? And then you had like 5 questions after that was your norm. And if I asked Danielle, it was 10 questions. So it was real inefficient there because we just didn't have a clear way to delegate. So, and then there were some in between there that we tried. We've tried with Mom. We did just Excel. We did OneNote. We did. I tried Microsoft To Do. I tried.
Isn't there
a couple? iFirm was one of the first ones that was expensive and one of the biggest mistakes. It didn't connect to anything. It just did its own little thing. And I still get notifications from that system. I don't know how. That was 6 years ago, or actually longer than that. But so the important part about task management is really looking at everything that you actually need it for, because there's some task management systems that have portals where clients can actually upload the information and you communicate through them. But you have to make sure that it also works well for task management. So we made the decision to not put the two together because we couldn't find the one that works just right for both. So we just decided to go with 2 systems, because the biggest thing that Megan and I were looking for is one system for all tasks, no matter what they were. Because what I see in most accounting firms is they have a system for leads, maybe. They have a system for just the client work, maybe. They have a system for the tax work, maybe. But they're not connected at all. And so there's no clear picture of what capacity looks like. And then admin is not on there. Then you have your marketing is not on there. Your content is not on there. And so it's really hard to get a big picture of capacity. So Megan, and you gave me a lot of pushback on changing from Jetpack, because Jetpack was like, you loved it because it showed you what you needed to do every day. But it made it really hard for me to delegate. So I just did the darn thing and didn't delegate anything. So we had a little discussion around change. So how do you feel that was handled?
So when I felt like it was handled, basically Leslie said, what are your concerns? So she listened to every concern I had and kind of navigated through, is it a legit concern or is it a change concern? Of course, they were all change concerns because the system worked for me. But that's where we kind of sat down and she showed me like full picture what she was wanting to see out of a system. And this was whenever we came to we did our best brainstorm, I feel like, ever to see, okay, we need to be able to put this, and this all in this system. It needs to automate these things. And this is what I need to see. So once I had that clear picture of what was actually missing, and she could, she really showed me like, if something's in review, I can't see that, right? I can't see like a mass of what's in review. And Tiffany actually said something that kind of kind of goes with this. She says, if I don't connect with the system, I have a bad attitude, which makes me not use it and defeats the whole purpose. So I feel like if we didn't have that, I'm not call it a come to Jesus meeting, but kind of around the systems, what's not working, what we're looking for. If she would have just said, okay, well, we're using this, get over it, it could have created that, where none of the team connected with the system, nobody understood it, and therefore the system would not have worked how it was supposed to.
Well, I would call it, we had healthy conflict on it,
There you
because
go.
we did, as a team, we came together and we discussed what every person needed in that system. And then we looked at, will this system do that? And that is ultimately how we went outside the accounting industry and found ClickUp. And ClickUp has been transformational for our firm, because we were also looking for something, because one thing that I would write a process or document a process or record a video, but then nobody could find it. So that was the other thing, is we wanted to tie the task management and the processes together in order to be able to where it was quickly accessible. And then same with the review process. And since implementing ClickUp, I have completely removed myself out of review. I think there's one client that I actually still review to this day. And it's because they're special, but then it gave you the confidence to be able to review where I don't have to review. It gave Chelsea the confidence to review. And then how much having a system that has a checklist of everything that needs to be actually done, how do you think that has changed our workflow and really streamlined, well, for example, month ends or payrolls?
So ultimately, I think ultimately it has streamlined it so much that we went from working our 40 hours to our 26 hours because of the amount of time we save, because we're not trying to scramble in our head of, okay, I did this, now what do I need to do? How did I do it last month? Because it's all in that checklist. And then also you have to, well, I done lost my train of thought. It just went out the door.
I've done that I don't know how many times today.
It was like
but
right
you
there.
see where you're at. You can see where you're at and where you stopped. So when you get interrupted, you can actually see, and you don't have to go back and try to figure it out.
Yeah. And okay, my thought came back to me. And then like with things that you miss, right? Because we all make mistakes. If we, get a monthly sent back for something, it gets added to the checklist. It doesn't happen again because it's right there.
With accountants, a lot of times is they're like, well, I'll just take it back because they did it wrong. Well, it's not, it's either three problems. It's either a system problem, a process problem, or a people problem. And most of the time I see it's the first two. The people problem is actually like 1% of the time. So, oh, Megan, you're back.
Yeah.
So, so Megan, have you noticed since implementing the processes and the task management together, there was times where we had team members that were struggling, but was it a people problem or was it the other two?
So I want to say it's been both really. But because we've had incidents where it is a people problem, but then we've also had whenever it's a process, but having that in the system and being able to easily go look, we can see, okay, it's not in the process, it's a process problem. But if we go and we find it, that's where we can have that healthy conflict as a team and say, okay, it was in there, what's going on, was it just a bad day, and really address it head on. But we can easily identify it now.
And then I hear all the time, and I know you do too, Megan, that tax can't be put in a process. This is Chelsea's first. Actually, she did a few returns for me last year. This year, she's done the majority of our returns. And while we're not a big tax firm, but she's done the majority of them with no experience, but she follows our checklist. And so, for example, I was reviewing one a few hours ago, and there was two things that she missed. And so I went and I looked at the process and I'm like, oh, this part wasn't in there. So I'm like, hey, these two are non-deductible. Make sure you add it to your process. This is new for this client this year. And then I fixed it. But then I know next year she has it in the process. So, and that was the only thing wrong with those returns. And it was around life insurance. That was it, on a Schedule E. So therefore we were able to move tax returns off of my plate to somebody else where I wasn't the one doing all the things. Because remember, years ago, I was the one doing all the things. So now, and I used to hate tax, but now that I'm not doing all the prep, I'm basically just high level reviewing it. I can actually work with the clients on their tax situation and work with them better and give them better coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to client experience. So, Megan, you actually have done this with several of our bookkeeping clients where you've had to help them make decisions. And a lot of it is because you were empowered to make decisions, but you had the pieces to be able to make decisions.
Yeah. And that's also where, you know, these processes, these task management, all that information comes into play, because I know that if I have to, like, we're empowered to make any decision in the firm. It doesn't matter what it is. But if I feel like I am missing the information, maybe I don't have everything I need, most likely I can go look at maybe some processes, some troubleshooting that Leslie has, or Lynn, or even Danielle, whoever might have did it before me, has written out, and see, okay, this is how they did it before. You know, this is my answer. And therefore I can take that to the client and be empowered to make that decision. Even if I didn't have all the information, I was able to find it.
Mm-hmm. And we used to not have our internal communication system within the task management system. We used to have that in Slack, and then we had a task management system. But then you were empowered to find out, hey, can we put communication within the task management system? How impactful has that been?
Oh my gosh. To me, it's been so impactful because I'm one of those people where I hate having 1,000 tabs open. So that was one less thing that I had to make sure I went and check, right? So now anything around a task, or even if it's not around a task, just like an internal chat, water cooler, whatever it is, it's in one place. So like I like to think of it as we have one main hub of everything that's going on inside the firm. It doesn't matter what it is. It's all happening in this one central spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when we had Slack, we had a lot of stuff that was falling through the cracks because it wasn't in the task management system, or they would say, I need help with XYZ. And I'm like, okay, what do you need help with? What's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
But it was because I didn't have the context of the task. So now with the communication being in that particular task, we have a lot of conversations just around that task. And then not everybody is attached to that task. It's only people that need to be attached to the task that actually see all that communication. And then you can tag each other in it. Where we were getting a lot of stuff where I know like our admin was spending a lot of time in Slack, and she had no clue what we were even talking about because none of it pertained to her. So it's really customizable to what you can actually use. So we combined quite a few systems into one by using this system. And then recently we've changed our CRM system, and they also have a task management component of it. And Megan and I went back and forth on, well, is it worth going, looking into it? But then we went through, okay, what's it going to solve? And that's what I see a lot of accountants not doing, is like, what is this solving for me? So Megan, do you want to talk about our conversation around that system and how we came to a decision?
Yeah, so I think, and just to kind of piggyback off what she said, anytime you're brainstorming, not even your task management system, any system, you have to really brainstorm it and think of, like she said, what's the one pain that you're trying to solve? So ours was, we just wanted to automate and streamline more. That's what we were just trying to do. So we kind of went through like each of the workflows. What would it look like if we moved, prospects from our task management and our actual task management system to our CRM, and kind of just weighed all of the options. And we got kind of buried in it for a little bit, kind of going through it and talking it out, seeing what would work. And then ultimately, Leslie kind of was just like, okay, pull the reins. Is this going to make it more streamlined? So we had to kind of revisit that pain, revisit what you're trying to accomplish. And that kind of keeps you from getting stuck in the technology overwhelm and the overload of, I just want to get it figured out, I think. So I think that was probably the biggest part.
Mm-hmm. But we weren't afraid to say, this is what this system is for, because we didn't want to break, because we were going to end up with two task management systems, which would take away the reason why we went to ClickUp, which was one task management system. And we were also afraid, and Danielle was a big component of this, that we were going to lose prospects in the pipeline if we moved them from ClickUp into Keap. So we were afraid. And that is exactly what would have happened. So we looked at multiple ways we could do it. But at the end of the day, we decided that we still wanted just one system, and we were going to let Keep do what it does best, and we're going to let ClickUp do what it does best. So it wasn't worth the consolidation, because Keep's task management system was very just small. It didn't have all where we could put the checklist in there. It didn't have, we could put the process in there. And so it had a lot of things that ClickUp has, because it is a task management system, where Keep is more of a CRM. So that's where you have to keep in mind what the system is actually built for, because there's a lot of systems that try to be everything. And so you have to think of what it does well.
Yes, and that's kind of like, whenever you're looking at a system, just because it can do it does not mean you have to use it. So a lot of these systems, even ClickUp, has 1,000 bells, whistles, shiny features, but you don't have to use them all. You have to use what is important to your firm. So that goes right back to that pain. What's going to solve the pain? All these bells and whistles, they might be cool, but is that going to solve your pain, or is it going to create more pain whenever you implement it and you have a bigger mess than before you started?
Mm-hmm. And when we first started implementing ClickUp, we actually drew it out on a piece of paper before I would and you were like antsy, like, oh, please let me play with it, because you love tech. But I was like, let's draw this out first before we actually built the system, because we wanted to make sure that it was going to solve it. And we also watched a lot of training videos around it, and then we made it our own.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the big thing with ClickUp. ClickUp comes as a big white space, and you can make it your own. But you've done a lot of cleanups on ClickUp as well for clients, where instead of, I know a lot of accountants are used to like QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks cleanups. Well, you're like the queen of ClickUp cleanups, because if it's not set up right, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I see a lot of
makes it worse.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of them where they import. That's pretty bad, but really, I think they just jump into it. They don't have that brainstorming piece of, what do I want to see in the system? Again, I'm going to say it again, what pain they're trying to solve with the system. So that again leads to the bigger mess, or like they go right in and want to use all the bells and whistles inside the system, and that's where they come up with, like I said, a bigger mess than what they had before. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
they were using the Excel sheet,
and then they think that system doesn't work. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, and that goes with any system. So, what are your thoughts? What are some of the things that you would think that they need to think about if they're thinking about changing systems or getting a new system? What are some of the things they need to think about?
So the first thing I always ask is, what are you trying to solve? So are you trying to solve capacity? Are you trying to see where all the work is at? Do you want to automate more? So that's always the very first thing I ask is, what are you trying to solve? What do you want to see? What have you already tried? So I know we preach this, the concept that we show, you can put into any system. So the system that you're already using, will it work? So I think it's just big picture of, what pain are you trying to solve? Are you missing deadlines? Is that what it is? Then that's where you need to start.
Mm-hmm. So you hit on a key thing, is if you're missing deadlines, because we see this a lot of times in a lot of places, and it's because, like in ClickUp, they're using start dates and not due dates, mm-hmm. or they're putting their due dates April 15th for taxes. Well, you really need to start on that like in March. Mm-hmm. So, so you have to understand the system's date issue a lot of times, because what I saw with a lot of accountants I've talked to on ClickUp is they'll say, well, the system doesn't work because the due date I have set for April 15th. And I'm like, you got to move that way up.
Yeah.
And so like we have a lot of our due dates set for April 15th, but then we start moving them. So because we don't want our boards to all of a sudden be full of tax when mm-hmm. the client hasn't even sent anything. So for example, on the S Corp returns, I would set the date as March 15th, but then as we finish the month ends for bookkeeping, I would move them forward, and then I would sign them out that way. Mm-hmm. Where I see a lot of people, they'll assign them on February the 1st, and then they look at their board and like, oh my God, I have too much stuff to do. And this goes with any task management system, because if you do a lot of returns, you're going to have a lot of work at one time. There's just no way around that. Mm-hmm. But so I have mine due on the due date, but then I move it back whenever their month end is done. And then that's how I sign it out. But how easy is it to delegate in a system like ClickUp?
I mean, it's literally as easy as long as you have, again, this goes back to having the processes in there, the checklist. It's as easy as switching an assignee. or assigning something
Mhm.
to another team member, because like literally it's as easy as a click of a button, because
Mhm.
you have all the information in there, so you can easily just hand it off and they can take ownership and complete the task. So another thing, like Leslie hit on with the due dates, is I wanted to add is basically think of it as not whenever the task is due, but when are you going to work on it? So if
Mhm.
you're obviously you're not doing all of your returns on April 15th. If you are, you have way bigger issues in task management.
Yep. So, so what the point of this whole thing is it was not to sell ClickUp, but even though that's the one we love, because we really don't care what system you use, but I'm telling you, the right system can transform your firm. And I hear a lot of accountants tell me, no, it can't. But it is literally the brains. I can't think of the last time I woke up in the middle of the night and said, oh my God, I forgot to do that. Because everything lives in ClickUp. If it's not in ClickUp, it doesn't happen. So, Megan, when was the last time you woke up in the middle of the night? And because I know early on, we used to wake up in the middle of the night a lot because we forgot stuff. So, when
Um,
was the last time you did that?
so long ago that I can't remember. I mean, now I wake up in the middle of the night, but it's with my kid. That's completely different. But I never have to worry anymore about, oh my God, did I do this task? I mean, whenever I first started 7 years ago, I would wake up in the middle of the night and be like, crap, did I do that payroll? Did I complete it by the due date? And I would just, you would lose sleep because obviously I'm not going to drive to the office to go check. I mean, I could
Uh-huh.
have, but so you're losing sleep because you're constantly worrying about these tasks, worrying about if they're done, and it's honestly, it's not good for you. I
Uh-huh.
mean, you can't live
So
your
you
life.
brought up a good point with payroll. I want to touch on this a bit because in Texas, when we had that freeze that actually took out all of our power, internet, everything, you were the only one that saw a window of power, and payroll was not really your thing then because you had moved into marketing and tech by then, but
Mhm.
you were easily able to run payroll for all the clients that needed payroll that week but one. Can
Mhm.
you talk about that a little bit? And I was on vacation, by the way.
Yeah. So she said it wasn't my thing then. It's not my thing now either. I absolutely hate payroll. But again, if I have to do it, I will. And that goes back to having those processes and that task management. Um, so I knew that nobody had power. We were kind of communicating whenever we got like a wave of cell service, since Texas was completely in an outage of everything. Um, so we had like small windows of it was a rolling blackout, right? So it was like small windows of
Mm-hmm.
internet usage. So I knew that the office had I had 2 hours, I think it was, to get from my house to the office, which is like 3 minutes away. Where I know Chelsea, who was in charge of the payrolls at the time, was a 45-minute drive. So with that being said, I was able to easily look at our task management system, look at what clients had payrolls for that week that had to be done. And since we had the processes, I was able to easily just go in and run as many as I could. Like Leslie said, there was only one I couldn't run, and that was a monster. 250 employees, that's all I'm going to say. So I was able to complete all of them. But the biggest thing is our clients never once asked us, is my payroll going to be ran? Because they knew with our internal systems, it would get done.
And so, what does that say about client experience of working with us? That they don't have to worry.
Yeah, I mean, that like you just said, they don't have to worry. They know it's going to be taken care of, and they know from the relationships we've created with them, and they know we're going to take care of it. We're going to do what we have to do to make sure what they are paying us for gets done.
Mm-hmm. And then the one with 250 employees, Chelsea had finally got. She used her hotspot in her car, and she actually was able to follow her process
Mm-hmm.
in her car. So she didn't have her notes at the office because it was also icy. So Chelsea couldn't get to the office either.
Yeah.
So because she was on the side that had a lot of ice, so she sat in her car because the process was tied into the system. She
Mm-hmm.
was able to actually do the payroll because I know a lot of accountants like, oh, I have my notes over here. Well, she wouldn't have been able to do that payroll with her notes because her notes were at the office.
Yeah, I mean,
So
2 years prior, we wouldn't have been able to do that because we were the same way. We had our written notes in our little filing thing that said notes in our desks. So we would have been in that same situation.
uh-huh. So where are your notes now?
Oh, they're all in ClickUp. So of course I'm still a sticky note girly. I'm gonna write my sticky notes if I'm on a call or something, But by the end of the day, those are all put into ClickUp so I can start my day fresh and know what I need to work on for tomorrow.
Hmm. So, so let's say in the task management system, you don't get to something that day. What do you do with it in ClickUp? Do you just leave it there?
Oh, don't make me cringe. So, and I see this a lot, and this is a lot of where people say the system doesn't work. I can't see what I need to do, but they let everything fall into overdue. So unless they have some powers I don't know about, you can't work in the future. So
The
it's
past.
become the past, yeah. Like you can't technically work in the future either, but you can't work in the past. So that's where if you come to the end of the day and you're like, well, crap, I didn't get to everything. Simply just drag it to whatever day you plan to work on it. It might not be tomorrow if you're, full of meetings, whatever. But that's where you just move it to the next day. So that way you can, effectively come in and see what you need to work on every day.
So I know what I like every day that I work, I plan out my top three things, even though my task in ClickUp may say I have 30, but I'll
Mhm.
plan out on a piece of paper my top three things. And I've seen you do that on your post-it notes.
Mhm.
Um, so, but is it because, and it's not because I don't trust the system. It's a reminder to me, these are my top three priorities today. So I don't get lost with the easy task, because how easy is it to get lost in the easy task and ClickUp?
Oh my gosh, I would if I didn't have my top 3 things, one, I a high inventor, so I constantly am like, "Oh my gosh, I can go over here and do this. Oh my gosh, I can go over here and do this." So my top 3 things give me a reminder that this is what you have to get done today. Because like Leslie said, or else I would spend all day in the system doing the fun work or doing the work that is easy because it gives you that dopamine hit of, "Ooh, I got something done." But that's not always the
I
most
close
effective
the
way.
task.
Yep, I
Yeah,
closed my
I
tab.
close. Uh-huh. And so also there's a lot of pushback on the task management itself, that you can't trust it. So what are your thoughts on that when people say I don't trust task management because I'm smarter?
Well, one, I'm gonna call bullshit because how can you not trust something that's going to literally tell you what you need to it's literally your well, like we say, it's another employee. I think a lot of the people who say they can't trust it have had bad experiences because I know I mean you probably going through 7, I know I didn't go through all 7 with you, but you probably at one point had that same mindset of I can't trust any of these systems, I'm missing work. So I think it's going to go back to implementation because if you don't set it up right, then it's not going to work right. So and that's where that trust comes in and just, not utilizing the system to its full capacity. But I think you also I mean, you have to give it the trust. You kind of just have to let go and trust it.
So what would you tell people that, because I hear this a lot and I know you do too, since you do our ClickUp coaching, that I don't even open ClickUp for 2 or 3 days, or I don't open my task management system for 2 or 3 days or a week.
Well, I always say, well, then what have you been working on? Have you been on vacation? That's typically what I ask
Yeah.
them because how do you know what you're doing every day if you're not opening it? And that goes right
Mm-hmm.
back to that trust is if you're not opening it, that tells me all I need to know that you're not trusting it
Mm-hmm.
or you don't have it
And
implemented.
lately we've been hearing a lot that owners aren't using the system. Their team, parts of their team are using the system, but the owners aren't using the system, and then neither are some team members. Some
Mhm.
of our accounting firms are falling into this trap. So what so when the owners don't use the system, what does that give permission for?
I mean, if the owner's not using it, why would the team? To me, that just
Mm-hmm.
sets the example, right? So, like, if you and Lynn weren't using the system, well, why should I use the system? And I know I had one coaching client where she told me that, well, they just have to use it. I don't. Well, you're teaching them that example. I always like to think of it as like as kids, you're setting the example for your kids. So I think of it as the
Mm-hmm.
same way. And I know for um like I think it also goes back to like team and being able to call each other on that because I know for a while Lynn was so bad about answering our like questions and stuff in ClickUp, and we would call her on it. And now I can't remember the last time Lynn missed something that I asked her.
Mm-hmm. So, and then that also brings up a great point. If you have one or two people that aren't using the system, that's where systems fail,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
then they're using their own system.
Yeah.
So
So
we
I
had
mean,
that example happen too.
if you're using your own system, whatever that may be, your piece of paper, your Excel sheet, how can the rest of your team easily or just glance and see what do you need to work on? So if I'm using my own system, my little Excel sheet of this is what I got to do, this is where I'm at with it. If I'm out with my son, how can anybody help me? How can anybody know what needs to be done? So that's where you run into deadlines being missed, or, just work not getting done.
Mm-hmm. And especially for remote teams, because,
Mm-hmm.
when we were in office, I know one time I had to go through a team member's desk to figure out where she was on stuff because she wasn't using the system. She was our one that was breaking the system. And we transformed her to use the system, and now she lives and breathes by it.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to go through her desk to find her post-it notes, her pieces of paper that had where she was at with things, her calendar to find out when stuff was due.
Mm-hmm.
And so when one person isn't using the system, then it can't be trusted. So that's why not only the owner, but every team member has to conform to the system. So that's why that agreement up front is, this is the system we're going to use. This is the system that's going to work until we prove it's not.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I always tell people, where if you don't have that buy-in, then what are you doing? There's no point in even, setting it up or going forward until you have that buy-in of the system. Because like you said, it's going to fail. And we just got lucky that, I don't remember the situation, but that we knew that we needed to, something triggered to let us know, like, okay, we need to go look and see what she did have to do, because there's cases, and, I'm sure some of the people watching this have experienced this, where they didn't know that they had to go look and search to figure out what needed to be done. Therefore, things were missed, whether it be bills, payroll, whatever it is, because they didn't know.
And then we were fortunate too, because y'all were monitoring each other's boards and something didn't look right because she didn't have any task.
Yeah.
And I know we've had clients that have been in the same situation where they've looked at their task management system and their team has no task listed for the day. And I'm like, then what are you paying them for? They're not doing what are they going to do? What are you paying them for? And this is where I see a lot of inefficiencies in accounting firms. And I know you do too, since you coach a lot of our clients too, is because they can't see what each other is doing. So what happens when one person needs to go out and they don't have a system that they trust?
So that's where, again, you see things fall through the cracks, or like whenever I went into labor a month early, if we wouldn't have had that system of what was I working on, what needed to be done, I would have been in labor worried if my tasks were going to be done, which obviously wasn't the best use of my time. So I think it just really helps make sure that the clients are taken care of, the tasks are done, and it just relieves a lot of the stress off of the entire team, not having to worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Chelsea went out 4 days after you, and Chelsea is heavy in bookkeeping. So that would have been different because she does payroll. So where you do more marketing and coaching, but you still had coaching clients as well that we had to transition. But Chelsea was responsible for paying people.
Yeah.
So we were able to quickly see, because hers was an emergency as well. We were able to see, hey, these are the payrolls she has to do for this week, because it also gives you autonomy to where you just take care of what's on your board. And we can see as the tasks are being moved that those were done. But it's because we know y'all are utilizing the system and y'all are taking ownership of that system. But there's a lot of accountants that say once you build a system that you never have to touch it again. Do you think that's true or BS?
That's BS. I mean, I think I'm updating ours weekly. There's always something that I'm changing, something that can be tweaked. And I think that's a lot of where the trust falls in the system, because if you just set it up and never look at it again, well, as the system changes, as roles change, as tasks change, if you're not fixing that stuff, it's not going to be efficient anymore. And I know we've had these issues to where, like, processes change, but checklists don't update. Well, okay, that's becoming inefficient.
And I even added at the bottom of the checklist that you confirm that you've followed this checklist, and I've confirmed that you have updated the process on the actual checklist. So that way, if you say you've updated that the checklist is up to date, I can go back to the task where you checked off that it was up to date. So then it also makes accountability.
Yeah, it's just
you're
like
using the checklist.
That extra level of accountability. So like before you check that, you're going to double think. Was it up to date? It's kind of like just like that double checking yourself.
And then the first step in the process, the checklist, is open the process. And we had to add those because people were not using the process. And so then and it was when we saw that stuff was getting sent back. Okay. And we went back to those three things. Is it a process, system, or people problem?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I saw that it was a process problem because they weren't following the process.
Yeah. And
then it could have became a people problem.
Yeah. And I mean, even, yes, we set it up because, you know, it wasn't happening, but also with our new hire coming in, Alyssa, our newest team member, she's now taking on more of a bookkeeping role. And if you think about her, whenever she started doing these monthlies, she wouldn't have known, like, okay, let me open the process, right? Because if you're just looking at it, it just tells you to start reconciling accounts.
Mm-hmm. So, and you came in with no accounting knowledge whatsoever, but now you do have accounting knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But you've been out of it for a bit. So if you had to take on, let's say, a client's set of books for the month now, would you be able to just do it without a process?
Oh my God, no. Lynn would
and
be
I'm going to use this
about it.
Well, and I'm going to use this example because I know there's a lot of taxpayers that are going to be tax people that are going to be watching this video. But we have a very complicated, or I call it complicated, but we do their bookkeeping, and then it has a lot of stocks and bonds. And so I hate that task with a passion. I hate that task because I only do it once a year, and I couldn't remember how I did it. So I'd always go back to last year, and I'm like, okay, where did I get that number from? Where did I get that number? And I would procrastinate it because I hated it so much. But it was because I didn't have a process. Mm-hmm. And back to Chelsea was able to do it this year with minimal tweaks. And I didn't have to do that task this year. All I had to do was review it. And that was a task I never thought I would be able to get off my plate. Danielle did it last year for the first time. And then so this year I did the tax return, and I just to double check my process. So next year I won't even have to do the tax return because I saw the process worked even to do the tax return. But balancing to the 1099s was also extremely difficult. And I was able to offload that off my plate, which gave me, I don't know how many hours back of my time. So people that say task management and processes, I don't have time. What do you say to that?
I mean, you only have time for what you make time for. So are you going to ever want to do it? Probably not. It's not fun. But you have to think about what you're getting. What is your outcome? What's the result that you're going to get from investing that time to implement it and work on it? And an hour a day, 30 minutes a day, whatever you can fit, it'll make a difference. But you only have time what you make time for.
Mm-hmm. And that process for those particular clients, because there's a couple of them, I did all the other processes first, which those were the last things to get off my plate. And when I was going through the review process, when I was going through and reviewing it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did this process, because it also made the review easy, because otherwise I was gonna have to figure out, okay, where did she get these numbers from? So it made it so we've spent a whole lot less time on that particular task and that particular tax return, because we spent the time in doing the process. And you have to take processes in bite-sized pieces, because they're not fun to do at all. And what would you say? There's a lot of people in the accounting industry that say you can just record a video and that's your process. What do you think about that, Megan? Because you're high visionary.
So as much as I would love to just watch a video and learn how to do something and not have to read it, it's not efficient because technology changes and some things can't be a video. Leslie has like a 7-page tax process. And if she sent me a video on how to do a tax return, I would fall asleep probably 10 minutes in. Or say, whether it's tax or month end, say I'm going along completing the task, but I come into an issue where I need a little bit of help. If I am comfortable doing the task, I have my checklist, so I don't really need to go in depth on the process. But say there's just one piece that I'm kind of not understanding, so I need to read that part, I'm going to have to sit there and scroll through the video to try and figure out where it was talked about. So again, that goes right back to being inefficient.
So, and what about the ones that transcribe?
Oh, like on the videos? So to me, that's again, goes right back to inefficiency, because what if it's not transcribed correctly? What if it's not picked up right? So then you're not having, it's incorrect information. Therefore, how does your team or how does somebody come behind you and know what you did? Because it wasn't transcribed correctly.
So in all the transcriptions I've seen, and I'll ask you the same, it all runs together. And just like everything's runs together, where the checklist and our process mirror each other. And then we have more detail in the process, where in the transcription, you're going to spend just as much time trying to make it mirror than if you would have just wrote, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3.
Yeah, and that goes into the uniformity of it, right? So having it uniform, like she said, having the checklist match from our task management to our process, that uniformity makes it so easy to know exactly where you left off and where you need to read at. Where if it was that giant 3-page run-on sentence of a transcribe, you're going to have to sit there and read the whole thing to figure out where you left off.
And then you're going to try to figure out where you're at too in that. So I just kind of wanted to jump in. I said this was going to be about task management, but task management and processes, to me, they go hand in hand, because you can't have one without the other if you want to effectively delegate. So we do have a training on how we set ClickUp up. And like Megan said, if you're not using ClickUp, no worries at all. You can still use the same concepts in any task management system that you choose. It's just things to get you to think. So if you want help with task management or process, comment help below and we'll get to you. If you want that training, just put training below and my team will get that over to you as well. Because Megan absolutely, ClickUp is like her happy place. She loves it so much. And she does help people actually implement ClickUp, because like I said at the very beginning, this is not my zone of genius. But it is Megan's, because y'all can see how passionate she is about task management and processes. So if this is something that you're wanting, then just comment training, or if you want help. Those are your 2 words to use. And I hope this was super helpful, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye.